In today's video, we're diving into a rich and fascinating era in early American life, a time when a young United States, growing in size, wealth, and confidence, began to craft something uniquely its own, an American culture. While the United States was still deeply connected to Europe in many ways, a new generation was emerging, one less tied to the old world and eager to define what it meant to be American. Strangely enough, this new identity would borrow elements from Europe, even as it wove in distinctively American voices, visions, and values. Let's get started. As the nation expanded and centralized, American culture became more distinct. The War of 1812, though militarily inconclusive, gave Americans a sense of victory. This spirit of triumph, combined with the so called era of good feelings under President James Monroe, ushered in a wave of nationalism and unity. But at the same time, across the Atlantic, a new movement was taking root in Europe: Romanticism. Emphasizing emotion, individualism, and a reverence for nature, Romanticism captivated artists, writers, and intellectuals. Americans embraced it, but infused it with their own frontier spirit and democratic ideals. No discussion of early American culture would be complete without talking about James Fenimore Cooper, often considered the first great American novelist. Cooper's novels, beginning with The Spy in 1821 and including The Pioneers and The Last of the Mohicans, brought readers vivid, romanticized stories of the American frontier. Cooper was the first to explore native themes, uniquely American settings, and characters who embodied the rugged individualism so central to national identity. His heroes were idealized Americans, brave, good hearted, and deeply connected to the land. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Walt Whitman was reshaping poetry. His groundbreaking 1855 collection, Leaves of Grass, was a celebration of individual spirit and liberation. And then there was Margaret Fuller, a pioneering feminist and thinker. Her book, Women in the 19th Century, boldly explored the relationship between self discovery and gender roles. She wrote, "Many women are considering within themselves what they need and what they have not." Her work gave voice to a growing movement toward gender equality. While American writers were redefining the literary world, artists were turning their eyes to the land itself. The Hudson River School, the first major American art movement, emerged in New York. Painters like Thomas Cole, Frederick Church, and Thomas Doughty created sweeping, majestic views of the Hudson River Valley. Their message was clear. In contrast to industrialized and crowded Europe, the American wilderness was vast, untamed, and full of promise. As Americans moved westward, painters like Albert Bierstadt and Thomas Moran captured even more dramatic scenes: towering mountains, endless plains, and wild rivers. Their work wasn't just art, it was a visual celebration of American exceptionalism and the promise of expansion. Even architecture in the early 19th century reflected America's cultural aspirations. Inspired by democratic ideals, the Greek Revival style became popular between 1800 and the 1850s. Capitol buildings in North Carolina, Indiana, and Ohio, along with the Second National Bank built in 1824, were modeled after ancient Greek temples, symbols of democracy and civic virtue. By the 1840s, however, another movement was gaining popularity: the Gothic Revival. This style brought back elements of medieval Europe, including chimneys, gables, gargoyles, and stained glass windows. The Gothic revival was romantic, dramatic, and full of mystery, an architectural reflection of the era's emotional depth and fascination with the past. Perhaps the most powerful expression of American Romanticism came from the Transcendentalists, a group of thinkers who believed in the power of the individual mind to reach beyond the physical world. They embraced the indefinable and unknowable, urging Americans to explore their inner potential and challenge the status quo. At the center of the movement was Ralph Waldo Emerson, who published Nature in 1836. Emerson argued that humans and nature were deeply connected, and that by understanding nature, one could understand the soul. His protege, Henry David Thoreau, took these ideas even further. In his 1849 essay, Resistance to Civil Government, he introduced the idea of civil disobedience, the refusal to obey unjust laws. Thoreau's philosophy would go on to influence future leaders like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. The early 19th century was a period of intense cultural flowering for the United States. Even as Americans borrowed from Europe's Romantic movement, they began to craft something entirely their own, an American identity rooted in democracy, nature, individuality, and a boundless sense of possibility. Through literature, art, architecture, and philosophy, Americans weren't just building cities and expanding frontiers. They were defining who they were and who they wanted to be. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.